Poland is looking to get nuclear weapons, while the Russians are using the fact that the United States are no longer sharing intelligence to start an offensive in Kursk that is already showing significant progress. But we'll talk about this as well as about anything else that has happened along the front lines and behind them in this situation report about the war in Ukraine. Surfshark VPN is sponsoring this channel for this month. If you want to bypass geo-blocking or hide your internet activity all with a convenient app, then use Surfshark VPN for just $2.09 a month by using my link. You get 4 months extra as well. Thank you, Surfshark, for sponsoring this channel. Russia has used the US sabotage in its air defense due to the fact that the United States is no longer delivering intelligence for a massive strike. Initially, before the latest strike, they continued their attacks, and among them were strikes on hotels, for instance, one in Kryvyi Rih, which is usually used by international aid workers. 4 people died in this case. But the big attack happened now. 67 missiles and cruise missiles were used by the Russians, including 35 KH-101s, 8 Caliber, 3 Iskander ballistic missiles, 4 S-300, HKA-59, as well as 194 Shahid drones that were used against Ukraine. Ukraine tried to defend against it with its F-16 and Mirage 2000. They published videos of the Mirage 2000 already taking out aerial targets in this case. Here, as we can see, short-range attacks, air-to-air attacks where the Mirage 2000 have managed to intercept. But as I said in the last situation report, obviously the fact that the Ukrainians will now lose probably hours in warning time leads to higher success rates with the Russians. This recent attack has hit various electricity plants and distribution station inside of Ukraine, and has led to blackouts at various parts in Ukraine. On the Kursk front, the Russians are advancing and attacking massively. The Russians have crossed the border here into Sucha, into Sumy Oblast. We have geolocation at this point where the Russians managed to cross over. In this case, they were pushed back, but the units of the Russians were destroyed. But the Russians are clearly aiming to reach the road here that supplies Sucha. The Russians have also advanced here down from Pokrovsk. They are continuing their advance further south and have now reached the area of Nikolaevka, as we can see here. Here. They are in the northern part of Nikolaevka, continuing to push the Ukrainians south west of Malaya Loknia. The Russians have also advanced a lot in the south here, where they've almost reached the international border north of Guyevo. And in the recent reports, there are recent claims of already house-to-house fighting happening inside of Sucha. Nexta is, as far as I know, a opposition media from Belarus, so generally anti-Russia in its policies. The claims here are that house-to-house fighting is already happening inside of Sucha. 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers are in the city, 6,300 are encircled, and so on and so forth. That does not seem to be the truth. Not only were there reports that counterattacks have already happened that were without any sources again, but if we take the pro-Russian media, this is from Riba, the big Russian mill blogger that with connections to the Ministry of Defense, we see that Sucha, the Russians have gotten closer, according to Riba, to Sucha, but no claims of an encirclement, no claims of fighting already happening inside of Sucha. We see that the Russians are attacking here in the northeast and in the east, pushing towards Sucha, increasing the pressure. From what we see right now, Sucha has probably not fallen yet, an encirclement has probably not happened yet, but the Russian mill bloggers generally appear very confident in their successes, so the Russian offensive inside of Kursk seems to be going to plan. The exact extents of the Russian advances right now cannot be confirmed. We'll have to wait to the next situation report to see what is happening right now. But as said, like the claims that there's a huge encirclement, I cannot confirm at this point. We switch to the Kharkiv front, and nothing new to report here. Fighting is obviously continuing, but nothing has changed on the ground. We switch to the eastern front, and here the Russians managed to extend their bridgehead over the Oskil River. They gained roughly this territory over the last few days, and they managed to advance in Sarizove. Here the geolocation that we have at this point shows the Russians at this point, but here they are ambushed by the Ukrainians and taken out. So this is at this point. Again, the deep state map showing it as contested area is correct. While the Russians have reached this point, they stayed there in a way they didn't intend to, so this does not mean that the Russian control was extended to this part here. The Russians also advanced close to Raihorodka, which we have at this point here. We have a geolocation of the Russians at this point here, as you can see, west of Raihorodka, and if I'm not completely wrong, this should be more or less at this point here. So we see that the Russians keep pushing and advancing in this area too, even though I cannot confirm a significant advance. That was it though, north of the Seversky Donetsk. We go to the area south of the Seversky Donetsk, and here we have a geolocation from Bilohorivka, which indicates that Bilohorivka, the Russians have already bypassed it. Now we see that, for instance, the pro-Ukrainian deep state map is still saying this is a contested area. We have here, this is the curve of the road. This one here, the Russians have already reached this point. That there is still Ukrainian presence inside of Bilohorivka is possible, I guess, but it increasingly seems unlikely. The contested area probably has to be extended to this point, so Bilohorivka might not have technically fallen yet, but the Ukrainians definitely do no longer solidly control it. Further south, the Ukrainians are reporting a significant attack of the Russians in Chasiv Yar. A Russian column of 25 armored vehicles has crossed the canal here. The Ukrainians published pictures and videos showing them fighting against it, and they reached here deep into Chasiv Yar, but in an area that was more or less contested before, so I do not see that they gained additional ground. The Ukrainian video shows a huge number of Russian IFVs and APCs being hit, a number of them being destroyed. The Ukrainians claim 16 out of the 25 armored fighting vehicles being used there were destroyed or damaged. But so no territorial changes in Chasiv Yar that can be confirmed. We go to the area of Toretsk, and here we start with a number of fresh Russian geolocations at various parts. This is interesting because it is more or less at this point here. So an area that is contested, showing us that the Russians are operating there in areas that were at least contested. We recently had a troop rotation in this area by the Ukrainians, showing that they still had presence in this area, and we have one more here. So this in total does not really give us conclusive evidence of anything having changed, but interesting is what we have from the southern quarter here, and here we have a fresh geolocation of the Ukrainians up here. This seems to be an indication of Ukrainian territorial gains, not just continuing presence, so it seems the Ukrainians have regained some territory in Toretsk. We switch to the area of Pokrovsk, and here we have the Russians getting closer to the town of Tarasivka. Here we have geolocations at this point where we can see it to the southwest of it, and then here at that lake. So this was here, and I think roughly here at this point the Russians are getting closer to Tarasivka, advancing in this area. The Russians have also entered the northern part of Lysivka. I showed you the deep state map still shows it as liberated. I already have shown you in a past situation report that the Russians were in the southern area here, in the southern part of Lysivka, but the fresh geolocation I have at this point here shows us that the Russians are in the northern part. Now this is the river, and this is the northern part. And this is more or less here at this point, indicating again that the contested area is probably at least this part here. As of now, the deep state map seems to be wrong, that Lysivka is liberated again by the Ukrainians. Further to the west, the Ukrainians are shown at new positions here at Pishchane. We have a geolocation of this as well. This was the wrong one. We have this here. This shows us Ukrainians in that installation, some agricultural, industrial, whatever area. Here again, showing us that the Ukrainians still have presence inside of Pishchane. But as you remember, I showed you in the last situation reports that the contested area definitely has to be somewhat extended, more than the deep state map admits here. But we have continued Ukrainian presence inside of Pishchane. This much is now visually confirmed. The Ukrainian military commenter and expert Petro Chernik said Ukraine is currently destroying 85% of everything they destroy in Russian targets in the Pokrovsk area with FPV drones, showing the dominance of Ukrainian FPV drones in the Pokrovsk area, and is probably also an indication why the Russian advances towards Pokrovsk have stalled so much recently. Further south in the rough direction of Kurakhove, we have the Ukrainians losing positions south of Zaporizhzhia. Here we have the Russians advancing at this point. You see here, this is the town of Zaporizhzhia. This is the Russians having reached more or less this point here, advancing further in this direction, and they have advanced southwest of Rozliv. And if I'm not completely wrong, they must have roughly advanced to this point here. As you can see, those are the three pieces here, and those are two lines here. And here is a small hook, if we want it this way. This is the small area, this is the second line. So the Russians have likely advanced to this point, probably extending the contested area, the gray zone, to this area at this point. But that was it with territorial changes. So the biggest changes, the biggest reports obviously are from Kursk, where the Russians are currently trying to push the Ukrainians out as fast as possible. And generally it shows what the Kremlin is quite openly saying, that the stopped aid for the Ukrainians does not impact them in any ways, leading them to not impact them in a way that it would lead them to make peace. Instead, the Russians are basically saying that we are going to use that to gain additional territory, again showing how the US President Trump, with his blockage of aid, not just of weaponry, but also of intelligence, is sabotaging the Ukrainian defense effort in this regard, leading to significant successes of the Russians. A source in Ukraine is saying that Ukrainian soldiers are saying it already did cost hundreds of lives because of the decision that was made by Donald Trump. And as we said initially, the air attacks were also coordinated in a way to use the fact that the Ukrainians no longer receive intelligence. Hackers have received informations from Russia, according to which 50,000 Russian soldiers were reported AWOL since February 2022. While this is quite a significant number, it is somewhat lower in reality, because they even say that Russian officers at times use missing in action, personnel missing in action, and simply are reporting them as AWOL for whatever reason. So the actual number of AWOL in Russia is lower than that. In the political sphere, we now have news that Maxar, the commercial satellite picture company, has also banned is no longer supplying Ukraine. This was the report from various points. Now it's being contested and said basically, no, they are still selling to Ukraine, but before apparently the US were taking the tap and handing over, making sure that Ukraine can access whatever they want in pictures in Ukraine as well as in Russia. This is no longer being done, but Maxar itself, according to reports, is not blocking purchases from Ukraine of its satellite imagery. According to, from the Ukrainian side, they are still talking about willingness to make peace, willingness to make a resource agreement, etc. All of this is while the US president has now said, I'm not going to start any aid again until date for negotiations are happening. But as you can imagine, for that two sides, both sides are needed, and Russia doesn't even think about doing that. Why would they? I mean, Trump is giving them Ukrainian defeat on a silver platter. Why would they agree to any peace agreement that is not a Ukrainian capitulation? So they are using it right now. By now, the Russians have not set back any single of their demand. They are still demanding a maximum of their war goals. And while Trump only does pressure the Ukrainians, and somehow thinking that this is a good negotiation tactic that is going to lead to some success. Now, obviously, this has led to the surprising realization that if you push the weaker part and trying to achieve a peace, that you still need the other side too, and that the other side might just use it to continue. Now he's claiming that that Ukraine is being pounded right now by the Russians, and he's now considering large scale banking sanctions and tariffs on Russia until a ceasefire and final settlement agreement of peace is reached. This is now him saying that he wants economic pressure on the Russians while the Ukrainians are receiving military pressure. The exact opposite would probably be the right way to achieve a peace, but in his wisdom, Trump is making this decision now. I cannot imagine the Russians being impressed by this. They are self-confident about their economic resiliency while they are seeing the opportunity to make military gains, while the Ukrainians will likely run out of air defense missiles, out of Patriot missiles in a couple of weeks. If the US do not resume the deliveries, why would Russia, under any circumstance, be willing to enter peace negotiations that are not a capitulation of Ukraine? So what President Donald Trump is doing here is basically helping the Russians. It continues like this. The political fallout is continuing. Marco Rubio said in an interview at Fox News that the Ukraine war is a proxy war. Basically saying that the Ukrainians have no agenda of their own. The Kremlin has obviously immediately used this for its own talking points, confirming that it is a proxy war and that the war is actually done by the US. Why Marco Rubio made that decision will probably remain his secret. Interesting is too that Trump staff apparently tried to depose Zelensky. They went behind his back and tried to do a color revolution or a coup inside of Ukraine. That's obviously a little hyperbolic, but it's basically using the Russian talking points in other circumstances, because Trump's staff has talked to opposition figures inside of Ukraine to depose Zelensky. They talked to Tymoshenko and Poroshenko, and the numbers from Ukraine are they talked probably to the two least likely candidates to get rid of Zelensky. Both declined, because both know they have no chance against Zelensky in fair elections. And the one person that is likely to beat Zelensky in fair elections is General Zaluzhny, who not only supports Zelensky in the current circumstances, but is considered much more of a hawk than Zelensky. So if Trump wants to replace Zelensky and receives Zaluzhny for that, he probably will achieve the opposite than what he intends. He will not receive a government that is more easy to make peace with. The Trump policies are leading to further foreign policy successes. Trump recently said that he would like nuclear disarmament. He spoke about a world without nuclear weapons while doing the foreign policy that he currently does, and Poland is reacting to this. And now the Prime Minister says Poland must pursue the most advanced capabilities, including nuclear and modern unconventional weapons. Poland thinks about getting nuclear weapons now, which is obviously needed if you do not trust your allies to the degree that their nuclear protection, that their aid is being guaranteed. And we see that nuclear proliferation will restart. Nuclear weapons are going to spread with the current foreign policy goals of the United States, and with their foreign policy of not being a reliable ally. This is leading to this now. Trump is also saying that he could withdraw the 35,000 US soldiers from Germany to Hungary to, I guess, punish Germany. I thought he was a real estate expert, so he must have a plan what to do with Landstuhl, Rammstein and Grafenwöhr, because those soldiers aren't in Germany without a reason. They are there for the infrastructure too, and how he wants to quickly move US soldiers to Hungary without investing billions and even more billions in infrastructure at the same time is going to be interesting. In international aid, we have some news. France is trying to make up for the US refusal to hand over intelligence. Obviously, France doesn't have the same capabilities as the United States, but they're trying their best to at least send as much as they can. The Dutch also said that they are going to reserve 3.5 billion euros for Ukraine, 700 this year, 700 of those for the production of drones inside of Ukraine. The United Kingdom has ordered Anduril drones for £30 million for Ukraine, and Norway has unanimously, all parties in Norway have decided to make sure that Ukraine can be supported by Norway with 7.5 billion euros. Regarding the size of Norway, that is an insane sum for Norway to aid Ukraine. This is the news in this regard. So the US president is keeping up its pressure against Ukraine, which leads to Russian successes, to nobody's surprise here. Russia itself doesn't even think about giving in any ways, and is rather using this golden opportunity that the US have provided them, while allies of the United States are now thinking about nuclear armaments. And obviously that discussion isn't limited to just Poland. The discussion itself is in other European and Asian countries as well, now as they are no longer certain of a US alliance. But that was it from me for today. If you enjoyed this situation report despite the topic, I would appreciate a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. If you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment if you have something to add. At this point, I want to thank once again Sam Garcia, who has once again been extremely generous by sending me British Cruisers 2 World Wars and After from Norman Friedman. Thank you so much for your support once again, for your book donation once again. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. There you also find my wish list, which Sam Garcia used in this case. Thank you very much to everyone supporting this channel. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.